Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine a woman who is just so fundamentally fine, so, utterly unbothered by the world around her, that her community decides the only logical explanation is that she has to be a monster.
Right. Yeah, because they just can't comprehend it.
Exactly. We're talking about, the widow who lives at the edge of the village. She doesn't remarry. She doesn't beg anyone for favors. And she somehow still manages to eat. She's just fine.
Just completely self-sufficient.
Yes. And because the culture around her fundamentally cannot handle a woman who doesn't need to be managed, they basically decide, well, she must have stolen her power. She must be practicing dark magic.
Right, which is such a wild leap.
It is. And so our mission today for this deep dive is to look at a fascinating stack of cultural and historical notes about the centuries-long smear campaign against that exact kind of self-sufficiency. We are looking closely at one heavily burdened word: enchantress.
Yeah, and it's a word that, for most of us, immediately conjures up these really highly theatrical images, right? Like, you probably picture a femme fatale or maybe a Disney villain in a dark cape.
Oh, totally. Like brewing up some neon potion to trick a man or, to steal a kingdom.
Exactly, some sort of total deception. But the sources we're looking at today have a completely different take. If you look at the ancient, radically empowering roots of the concept, it has absolutely nothing to do with seducing a crowd or casting an illusion.
Right.
True enchantment, at its core, is entirely centered on self-ownership.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text has this amazing metaphor that completely shifted how I view the word. It's about the mechanics of the word itself, right?
Yeah, so if you look at the etymology, enchant comes from the Latin incantare, which literally means to sing into being.
To sing into being, wow.
Right, so the original concept wasn't about waving a wand to force a specific outcome. It meant to chant upon something. You lay a steady rhythm or a sound across a thing until the world naturally rearranges itself around that vibration.
Hold on, so if the magic is essentially just a constant sound, then it's not an attack at all.
No, not at all.
It's more like, have you ever seen someone shatter a wine glass with a tuning fork?
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Because you don't strike a tuning fork and it suddenly, runs around the room demanding that the glass break.
Yeah, it doesn't beg the air to change.
Exactly. It just holds its note, and it holds it so clearly and so relentlessly that the glass either finds a way to vibrate at that same frequency, or it just doesn't survive contact with something that refuses to waver.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. Because frequency, it doesn't work by demand, it works by coherence.
Coherence, I love that word.
Part of this that got completely edited out of the fairy tales over the centuries is, well, who the spell is actually meant for.
This part blew my mind.
Right. The first and most important incantation is never cast on a room. It's never cast on a lover or an enemy. It is always cast on the self.
On the self.
Yeah. Before an enchantress can change the shape of any room she walks into, she has to basically sing herself out of every narrative that was written by someone else. She has to sing herself back into her own custody.
Back into her own custody. And our sources mention that the core incantation isn't some complicated Latin hex. It's literally just 3 words. I own myself.
See, so I own myself, yeah.
Yeah, which, that sounds fantastic on a modern bumper sticker.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be real, historically, if a woman just walked around declaring, I own myself, she didn't get empowerment.
No, she got burned at the stake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how did self-authorship become synonymous with witchcraft? How did we get there?
Well, to understand that, you have to really look at the structural reality of the societies making those accusations.
The feudal societies, mostly.
Yeah, highly patriarchal societies. Historically, a woman whose center of gravity sat firmly inside her own chest was, structurally speaking, basically impossible to govern.
Right, because she didn't fit into the boxes.
Exactly. In those systems, a woman was categorized by who she belonged to. You secured her through marriage, you organized her through motherhood, and you explained her existence by her relationship to a man's name or a man's house.
She was literally a line item on someone else's ledger.
And suddenly, you have a woman who is completely outside that system. Because retaining the final edit on the manuscript of your life means you refuse to read someone else's draft of who you are, even if they hand it to you with absolute authority.
Wow. Yeah.
So if you are building a society organized around controlling people, self-ownership is a literal threat to the social order.
So they couldn't just say, wow, good for her. They had to criminalize it.
Yeah.
And reading through the historical accounts in our notes, there's this incredibly dark humor, about who is actually accused of
Yeah.
bewitching their neighbor.
Yeah, it wasn't who you'd think.
No, it wasn't the chaotic, strange people acting wild in the streets. It was the women who were, as the text says, infuriatingly fine.
Infuriatingly fine, right. Self-sufficiency in a woman required a supernatural explanation
Right.
because the whole society was organized around preventing it from happening naturally.
Right.
So if she didn't need a man's permission to thrive, the cultural assumption was that she couldn't possibly just possess that power naturally. Like the way a river is just naturally wet, she must have stolen it.
She had to be cheating somehow.
Exactly. Her quiet independence was recast as theft or trickery or something fundamentally unnatural.
Which means history basically ran this massive, centuries-long PR smear campaign against self-sufficiency. And it wasn't just everyday villagers who got this treatment.
No, it went way deeper.
Yeah, this cultural rewrite went all the way up to our oldest, most foundational myths. Let's talk about Lilith from older folkloric Judaism, because I feel like her story is the ultimate example of
Oh,
that.
absolutely. The evolution of the Lilith myth is incredibly revealing. In the very early folkloric traditions, Lilith was actually formed as Adam's complete equal.
Wait, really? Like, completely equal?
Yes. They were made from the exact same earth at the exact same moment. There was no rib involved, no derivation at all.
She wasn't a sequel.
No, she was a peer. And the entire original conflict stems from the fact that she refused a demotion.
Right.
She wouldn't lie beneath him physically, which was highly symbolic of refusing to lie beneath him positionally. She was handed a false story about her rank, where she was suddenly supposed to be secondary.
And rather than accept that draft of her life, or endlessly renegotiate her standing with someone who was, committed to misunderstanding her, she just left.
She held her note and walked away.
But religious and cultural traditions couldn't just leave that sentence standing in the text, could they?
No, of course not. You can't have a foundational myth where the woman asserts her boundaries, leaves, and is basically proven right.
Right, because that's way too destabilizing for the social order we were just talking about.
Exactly. If Lilith is right, the whole hierarchy crumbles. So over generations of storytelling and commentary, narrators systematically mutated her character.
They turned her into a monster.
Literally, she was turned into a night demon. She became a child stealer. They warped this beautiful archetype of self-ownership into a literal monster just to scare daughters into softer, more compliant postures.
It's so tragic. And we see the exact same edit with Morgan Le Fay in the Arthurian legends. I was blown away by this part of the research.
Yeah, the Morgan Le Fay story is so telling.
Right, because in the oldest layers of her myth, Morgan isn't a villain at all. She is a supreme healer. She's the sovereign of this island of orchards. And when kings were dying in battle, they weren't taken to a hospital. They were brought to her.
Because she was simply the absolute best at what she did.
Exactly.
She represented unaccompanied competence. And again, generations of later narrators, these were often monks or scribes who were deeply, deeply uncomfortable with a powerful woman who didn't require a king's permission to practice her art. They began to flatten her out.
So they literally took the best doctor in the realm and turned her into a supervillain just because she didn't need their approval.
Pretty much. They recast her independence as scheming. Her healing arts became dark manipulation. Her simple refusal to be subservient was written as spite and jealousy.
Wow.
Because malice is a motive that audiences have always found much easier to stomach than a woman who simply knows her own worth and doesn't ask for a second opinion on it.
It's wild how relatable that still is for you today, Think about how often pure competence, especially in a colleague or a friend who isn't running around seeking constant validation, makes the people around them deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, we see it all the time.
We still want to project a negative motive onto it. We want to say, oh, they're just arrogant, or they think they're better than everyone else. It's a defense mechanism against that tuning fork frequency. Can't handle the clear note, so we pretend it's a screech.
Which actually brings us to the ultimate proof of this mythological rewrite, and really, it's the key to understanding how true enchantment works in practice.
Story of Circe.
Yes, Circe from the Odyssey. She's traditionally known as the famous witch who turns men into swine.
Right, the classic reading is that she creates this horrific illusion to trap innocent sailors. But our source text flips this entirely.
Completely flips it. She doesn't invent the pig inside these men. She reveals it.
This was a huge aha moment for me. The text points out that these men arrive at her island already governed entirely by their appetites. Like they're already unable to master themselves. They're driven by greed and instinct.
Exactly. So Cersei wasn't casting an illusion at all. She was acting as a mirror.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because her power isn't deception, it's diagnostic.
Diagnostic, yes. These men arrive wearing the story they privately tell themselves about their own decency, their honor, their heroism, and Cersei simply declines to keep reinforcing that story for them.
She removes the illusion of decency they were using to disguise themselves.
Right.
But let me push back on this a little, because it's easy for Cersei to act as a diagnostic mirror. She's a mythological figure on a private island. For you, the listener, trying to navigate a 9-to-5 job or, a tricky relationship, how do you actually do this? How do you drop the veil on other people without just coming off as a highly critical jerk? Especially when your livelihood or your social standing might literally depend on keeping those people happy.
That's a great question. And this is where we have to introduce a crucial concept found in Indian philosophical thought, Maya, or the veil of illusion.
Okay.
Usually we think of an enchantress as wielding this illusion against others, but the true order of operations is reversed. Before anyone can act as a diagnostic mirror for a room, they have to see through the illusion regarding their own worth.
Meaning the illusion that your value is up for debate.
Exactly. The most pervasive illusion is the false idea that your core value is a live vote, constantly up for re-election, and decided by unqualified people in rooms you don't even control.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy.
You have to pierce that veil for yourself first. If you haven't done that, you might still be captivating, you might be incredibly charming and hold a room's attention, but you aren't enchanting it.
You're just performing.
Right, you're just angling a reflection to catch the light of whoever happens to be watching. And the second they look away, your sense of value goes with them.
Because your power was on loan. It was entirely contingent on their attention. And this leads us right into the physical, palpable difference between putting on a performance to get those votes and actually owning yourself.
Yes.
Our sources talk about this as the difference between non-organic energy and organic energy.
Right. So non-organic energy is manufactured allure. It's the carefully rehearsed posture, the perfectly timed laugh, the outfit chosen specifically to manage someone else's perception of you.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is deeply exhausting because it requires constant real-time audience feedback to know if the performance is working. And it basically flickers out the second the room empties.
We've all felt this. Think about a high-stakes job interview or a tense first date.
Yeah.
You're projecting this non-organic energy, and inside, you can physically feel the static of internal disagreement.
That static is so real.
It's that feeling when your mouth is saying, I'm totally confident in my ability to hit these quarterly targets, but your gut is quietly terrified and your shoulders are sort of apologizing for taking up space.
Let's actually look at the biology of why that static is so palpable. Because the human nervous system is an incredibly highly tuned instrument. It evolved over millennia to detect incoherence in others.
So it's like a built-in lie detector.
It's essentially an evolutionary lie detection mechanism. When thought and physical sensation disagree, when you are faking it, your body leaks that internal conflict.
Wait, so even if I have the perfect script, my body is giving me away?
Absolutely. The vagus nerve, which regulates our vocal cords and facial expressions, it responds to our internal state, not our rehearsed script.
Oh, wow.
So when you don't actually believe the note you're singing, your pitch climbs half a tone. You laugh a microsecond too early because your body felt the anxiety before your mouth even finished the sentence.
That is wild.
And everyone in the room can feel that static, even if they can't consciously name it. It reads to their nervous systems as untrustworthy or just forgettable.
That makes so much sense. So organic energy is what happens when you remove that static.
Exactly. Organic energy isn't generated for an audience at all. It is simply what radiates when there is zero gap between what a person knows to be true and what their body confirms.
Plain coherence.
Yes. Thought and sensations stop negotiating and start agreeing. And honestly, plain coherence is indistinguishable from magic.
Like a musical chord that agrees with itself, instead of straining against a wrong note. And because you aren't leaking all that energy trying to suppress a contradiction, your actual voice carries differently.
Which ties right back to Incanteri, the singing.
Right. A cell phone person doesn't need to yell to be heard across a crowded boardroom. Their internal coherence literally carries. Undiluted signal always travels farther than performed volume.
It really does, but we have to be careful here because it is very tempting to treat this transformation as a purely victorious, easy upgrade.
Like it's just a quick fix.
Right, to say, great, I'll just drop the non-organic energy, find my organic coherence, and everything will be perfect. The text insists we look at the very real costs and the daily maintenance involved in this.
I'm really glad you brought that up because giving up the performance sounds exhausting, but also sounds kind of lonely. There is a very real cost to this level of coherence.
There is. You lose a specific type of warm, easy belonging.
Yeah, there's a comforting dynamic you get when you're slightly uncertain of your own worth, where people get to rescue you or gently correct you or manage your emotions.
You lose the belonging of being a project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reality is, people who liked you containable, people who built their entire relationship with you around being the one who talks you off the ledge or explains you to yourself, they might not experience your new coherence as growth.
They might experience it as abandonment.
Because the version of you that required their constant intervention, the version that made them feel important, is just gone.
This causes a dramatic shift in how you experience desire. The enchantress, the self-owned person, is still deeply desired, but the source of that desire changes entirely.
How so?
It shifts away from people who want to use you to fill a permanent vacancy within themselves and moves toward people who are actually capable of wanting a whole person.
Hey, that's powerful. It's the difference between someone wanting to build a foundation with you versus someone who just brought a gaping hole into the room and politely hopes you'll stand in it.
That's a perfect way to put it, which is why maintaining this whole self is an ongoing practice. The chant, "I own myself," isn't a one-time achievement. You don't take one candlelit bath, do one journal prompt, and suddenly you are immune to the world.
Right. The note has to be resung daily.
Daily.
Because every single day is going to bring some fresh, totally plausible argument for handing the pen back to someone else.
Always.
It might be an offhand passive-aggressive comment from a coworker, or a silence where you expected praise from your partner, or just an old insecurity flaring up in the mirror.
And this brings us to the true nature of the enchantress's armor. Because owning yourself doesn't make you numb, doesn't make you a sociopath who never feels the sting of rejection. You still feel insults.
But the mechanism of how an insult works changes completely. I love this visual from the text. An insult operates like a key.
Yes, the lock and key.
If somebody hands you a cruel comment, it only works, it only lands and does damage if you have the matching lock of self-doubt inside you.
That is the crucial mechanic. An insult needs an internal crack to enter through. It requires a quiet, unresolved argument that you are already having with yourself.
Right.
If someone calls you foolish and a small part of you secretly fears you are foolish, the insult slides right into that matching lock and turns. But when you are in full agreement with yourself, when you have achieved that organic coherence, the insult arrives, you register it, but it has nowhere to live.
The lock is gone. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, tomorrow morning? When you wake up and have to face the commute, the boardroom, the date, or just your own reflection?
It means treating this philosophy as a daily discipline. It is closer to the biological act of breathing than a fixed personality trait.
You have to keep doing it.
Right. Some days that tuning fork note is going to waver, you're going to get tired, you're going to lose the frequency, and you might accidentally absorb someone else's static.
And when that happens, you haven't failed. You just have to consciously take the pen back. You retain the final edit on your own life story.
Exactly.
And that brings us right back to the image we started with. True enchantment was never about putting a spell on a crowded room. It doesn't start on a stage. It starts in an empty room, where you are tuning a note for yourself for no other reason than you want to hear it clearly, without anyone else's frequency layered over it.
And the incredible thing is, the room eventually changes shape simply because you stop asking for permission to sing your own note. You stop vibrating to the demands and expectations of whatever space you walk into.
Yeah. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to mull over today. If the ultimate goal of self-authorship requires us to stop adapting our frequency to the demands of the room,
Then what happens when a community is built entirely of self-owned people?
yeah,
Instead of conforming to one dominant frequency, what kind of entirely new, unscripted collective harmony might emerge from a room full of independent tuning forks?
that's something to think about. Until next time, keep holding your note.